It was 1968 when Cuba nationalized its businesses and began a Soviet-style system that had all enterprise controlled by the state. Since then, opportunities for self-employment have been restricted, but conditions appear to be changing. This summer, more than 125 state-operated establishments have been converted into private cooperatives, which give the Cuban people an opportunity to run a business on their own. It's part of the government's effort to reform the economy and spur growth. And it seems to be spurring optimism, too. As correspondent Michael Voss reports, all across the island, the entrepreneurial spirit of the Cuban people is alive and growing alongside a bountiful harvest.
This makeshift fruit and vegetable market in a dusty parking lot on the outskirts of Havana is the first wholesale outlet in Cuba not owned and run by the state. Giovanni Cardenas has brought onions from his cooperative farm in Villa Clara province, some 300 kilometers from Havana. The farm still has to provide most of what it grows to the state. Until recently, he'd have been stopped and fined if he tried to bring food to the capital like this.
So these are your permissions to come to Havana. Esos son los permisos de venir a La Habana.
Now Giovanni Cardenas can legally come here, providing he shows that he's met his state quota.
It's a good opportunity because after you complete the process of acquiring permits, you can go out and sell your excess produce, and most people sell it at a reasonable price.
The market started as an illegal gathering. Now it's tolerated but tightly regulated.
Almost all of the distribution and wholesale operations in Cuba continue to be controlled by large state-run monopolies, which so far none of the private businesses have access to.
This is the first time that local private restaurants, as well as these self-employed street vendors, can buy in bulk. Now there's pressure to let other new businesses do the same. Cuba has a total workforce of 5 million people. In 2010, just 150,000 were registered as self-employed. Today, that's jumped to 430,000, according to the Ministry of Labor. Many, like DELBYS LEGRA, who've opened closed stalls, have to rely on a growing army of Cubans who can now freely travel abroad and return with bags bulging with merchandise. But DELBYS LEGRA would much rather be able to buy wholesale here in Cuba.
The only problem I have today is that I don't have a wholesale market where I can go and buy goods to be able to bring my shop to the level I would like.
Private cafes and restaurants also have to buy all their supplies, from flour and cooking oil to beer and soft drinks, at full retail prices in local state-run supermarkets. The government acknowledges that private businesses do need access to wholesale markets, but letting go of state monopolies is proving difficult. According to the Minister of Economics, Marino Murillo, they still haven't fully worked out how best to do it.
We're making progress in developing self-employed workers. Among the most pressing measures is establishing wholesale markets, so the self-employed can purchase their products. It is still a work in progress.
Shortly after Fidel Castro came to power, he started nationalizing all of the major farms, banks and industries, many of them American-owned. It's what prompted the US trade embargo, which continues to this day. Later, as Cuba became ever closer to the Soviet Union, all remaining businesses on the island were taken over by the state, right down to shoeshine boys and street vendors. It's this second phase of nationalizations which the government now concedes was a mistake.
We have learned over the years that the state cannot rule the economy. There is room for others. In the process of updating the Cuban system, we are open to non-state formulas.
The latest change involves converting small-scale enterprises into private workers' cooperatives. Businesses like this produce market in the nearby province of Artemisas. In the past, this market only sold what the state provided and at fixed prices. Now, as a cooperative, it can buy from whoever it wants. Manuel ROBAINA is in charge of admin at the market. He's also become the head of purchasing.
What car are you driving? ¿Qué carro es?
Chevrolet.
Chevrolet. What year? ¿Qué año?
51.
A 1951 Chevy. Lovely.
The market only became a cooperative at the beginning of July, but already Mr. ROBAINA has sufficient new sources for all of his products to let him ditch the old state supplier altogether. Our first stop is a state collective farm.
¿Qué producto es ese? What is this? Boniato. It's a root crop.
It's similar to a sweet potato, which is very popular here. My clients don't like big boniato, they want small ones, he tells the farmer. In the past, farmer Frank Fernandez sold everything directly to the state at fixed prices. Now he's having to deal with new concepts like quality, supply, and demand.
Prices depend on the quantity of produce and the season. Supply and demand regulate the prices. We bargain over prices with customers, and if I don't get what I want, I will find another way to sell. It's the same for them.
Our next stop is one of the growing band of private farmers. In a bid to boost agricultural production, the government has leased out more than 1 million hectares of underused state land to private hands. Manuel ROBAINA has come here to buy spring onions.
Before, when we belonged to the state, we could never get spring onions distributed. The state network, Acopio, wouldn't buy them from farmers.
In the past, the state gave you so much food to sell, and if you didn't sell it, it just went to waste. Now, you've bought it. It's your risk.
Yes, before the state company took the losses on unsold produce. Now we buy regularly in small quantities according to the demand that we have.
Back at the market, customers can now buy a much wider range of produce, including for the first time staples like beans and rice. There are just over 100 similar pilot projects, ranging from construction to catering and transport cooperatives. If successful, others will be rolled out across the country next year.